Wow. Just wow. I honestly forgot how good this game was. I remember when I was just a teenager back when I was begging for a PS2 very late in the cycle just so I could get a chance to play Final Fantasy X. That intro just had me hooked. I'd even argue that it rivals even the Final Fantasy VII intro bombing sequence. You start off on your way to a blitzball game as the star player of the Zanarkand Abes, as a newscast goes off in the background talking about Jecht, your father. I absolutely love this scene, and honestly, it's probably one of my favorite scenes in the game because of how important it is for Tidus's character and what he's all about. And yes, Tidus, not Titus, titties, whatever. I don't care that that's how the game's creators say it's pronounced. Tidus sounds much cooler, okay? This scene already serves to accomplish so many different things. For one, we know Jecht is Tidus's father, and two, we know that he's dead. We also know that Tidus doesn't seem to like his father very much, just based off the little fist shake he gives toward the screen, and so one of Tidus's major character arcs, his relationship with his father, is done seamlessly through the gameplay as you're on your way to prove yourself as a star Blitz player in your own right, on the 10-year anniversary of his supposed death. Now, think about Final Fantasy IX, a game that was released just 2 years beforehand. Now, I'm not trying to shit on Final Fantasy IX or anything, because I think that game is just as good, but you have to admit that they really took a step up in the technical department with Final Fantasy X. Literally just the second scene in the game and you're greeted with this marvelous city and cheering fans and just amazing stylized graphics that the PlayStation 2's hardware was able to bring to life. You can tell that Square really wanted to make a grand entry and show that Final Fantasy was in a league of its own with this game. I'm not done. Then, the game hits you with this. And right after that, you're thrown right into the action with Auron, fighting your way through enemies, running through them. This is exactly what I'm talking about with the PS2's hardware. You couldn't do this type of shit on a PS1. But back to Blitzball for a second, can you believe they made up an entire sport just for this game? Not to mention, making it a pretty fun playable minigame, which, controversially, you have to play to get one of the character's ultimate weapons. More on that later, but you just have to appreciate the effort that went into this. I mean, not only did they make up a sport, they also made up an entire freaking language that you can learn through collectibles. So while you may not understand a word these people are saying on one playthrough, on the next playthrough, you'll be able to actually decipher what they're saying. And this is all just for one Final Fantasy game. All these things I've mentioned serve to really enrich the world of Final Fantasy X, and I think that's one of the biggest aspects that this game really nails on the head. Spira is such an interesting place, and playing as Tidus, someone who knows absolutely nothing about Spira, you learn more about the world as he does, and it serves to tighten that connection between Tidus and the player. When Sin sucks him up and leaves him stranded, cold, alone, and hungry, you really feel for the guy. He's battling fiends all by himself, getting beat up mid-battle, and so when someone finally comes to help him, it feels all the more rewarding because taking on a boss with only one turn in an RPG is a pain I'm sure everyone watching knows all too well. Speaking of battles, let's talk about the combat in 10. This was the first game that finally decided to take a few liberties with the turn-based system of the past. The combat is still turn-based, but you're able to see the order of who's going to attack in the upper right corner of your screen, and there are many different factors that can affect this order. Say if you use Delay Attack with Tidus to delay the enemy's attack to another turn, or if you use Heistaga on the group, increasing everyone's agility to get more turns in. But that's not all. You have a total of 6 characters, all of which can be swapped in or out of battle at any time given that it's your turn. Each character specializes against unique enemy types, Wakka being good for flyers, Tidus being good for quick foes, Auron being good for heavy-duty enemies, and so on and so on. It's a really cool system and definitely my favorite take on turn-based battles in any RPG. And that's high praise coming from me, because I do not like turn-based combat. Also, Wakka's attack gets me every time. Dude frickin' chucks a blitz ball at the enemy and 5,000 damage. Shit's funny. That's not to mention the bosses in this game. Every single one of them is so much fun to fight because of the diversity within these boss fights and all the different types of boss monsters that were masterfully designed for you to take down. Except for Seymour, screw this guy sideways, I hate him, I hate him, I hate him. But other than that, the Chocobo Eater, there's a mechanic where you have to deal enough damage to make sure he doesn't push you off the edge of the arena, but on the flip side, you can push him off the edge instead if you deal enough damage for extra rewards. Or this Albed Machina, where you have to use Lulu to power the crane to deal massive damage and make the fight way easier than if you didn't use the crane. These trigger commands and Easter egg boss features are such a cool idea, and I really wish they had continued with this trend in the Final Fantasy series instead of letting these ideas die with 10, because it made the bosses feel like more than just a regular battle, as all boss fights should feel. Okay, so let's quickly talk about the sphere grid. This is how you level up in Final Fantasy X. There's no such thing as level 1, level 2, no, none of that. Instead, you gain sphere levels, which you then use to traverse across the sphere grid, upgrading stats like strength, evasion, magic, so on and so forth. Each character starts on a separate portion of the sphere grid to go down their respective paths, at least on the standard version of the sphere grid. That's because, like I said before, each character plays a role in combat, except for Kimahri. Now, I'm not going to take a dump on him like Pro Jared did, because while he has no specific role, he can be used to achieve high-level spells much earlier than other characters, and can be very useful early game when everyone else is still trying to get to the end of their grids. After that, well, he is kind of useless. Now, Final Fantasy X wouldn't be Final Fantasy without our cast of characters, yeah? One of the first people you meet in Spira besides Riku is Wakka, and man, Wakka is probably my favorite character besides Tidus. He's hilarious, and the way he talks is just straight up iconic.
I'm Wakka, coach and captain of the Besaid Aurochs, brother.
I can't help but laugh every time he hits me with a yeah.
Yeah.
And the way Tidus feels right at home with him because he also plays Blitzball, you as the player also feel like you found a new home with Wakka and his team of Aurochs too. Outside of the excellent world building, the characters here feel so alive. And I don't mean just Wakka, even the random minor NPCs. Just after Tidus meets Wakka and the Aurochs, he performs the sphere shot. And right afterwards, you can see the Aurochs trying to copy the way Tidus just did the shot and failing miserably. And it's actually so freaking funny. See, the developers didn't have to do that. They could have just had them standing there awkwardly around Wakka, waiting for you to talk to them. But they didn't. They put in that extra effort and it shows. That's just one scene too. There's so many other different examples of this. On your way to Luca, you'll see people crowding around Yuna, vying for her attention, much like people in the real world would when you're around someone with celebrity status. Or the characters will have conversations about events surrounding the game while you're not around, like with Wakka and Lulu discussing Tidus becoming Yuna's guardian. Every character's designs are also done incredibly well. Wakka looks and talks like this chill, laid-back dude who just wants to play Blitzball all day, but when it comes down to it, he's honest and dependable. Lulu, dressed in all black, with her legs literally covered and her clothes held together by belts, helps to signify how closed off from the world she's become since the death of Chappu, Wakka's brother. But underneath it all, the closer you get to her, you can see she cares more for Tidus and the rest of the group than you first thought. Auron, do I even gotta say it? Straight badassery, one arm out of the coat. You know when the coat sleeve's flimsy, you got a badass on your hands. That's just JRPG standard at this point, okay? Now, a lot of people seem to take issue with Final Fantasy X's linearity. I've seen lots of contention and comparisons to Final Fantasy XIII. See, whenever people take issue with the flaws and problems that 13 has, they point to Final Fantasy X and say, yeah, but Final Fantasy X was just as linear, doofus. To which I say, yeah, it was. But in Final Fantasy X, the linearity isn't a bad thing, due to a couple of reasons. The story, world building, and characters serve to carry a lot of the weight of the game. Where it may be somewhat lacking in exploration, it does not lack in any other category. And while the environments may be linear, they are so incredibly beautiful and widely varied that it never feels like you're in the same place. One minute, you're in the oceanside village of Besaid, swimming along its shores with barely anyone around, as a backwater village should be. The next, you're in Kilika, a rackety town held up by a bunch of random plankwood, with people around repairing the village as it had just been attacked by Sin. Then you're in Luca, a grand, vibrant city and the home of the biggest blitzball stadium in the world of Spira. And not only are the environments beautiful and varied, they're filled with people doing different things, and every single one of them you can interact with. Luzu and Gata, you meet them in Besaid. They're Crusaders, a faction separate from the Summoners that aim to defeat Sin with Machina, something forbidden by Yevon, the most prominent religion in Final Fantasy X. You can see them running alongside you as Titus journeys throughout each area, going along their own stories as you go through yours. Belgamine, the old scholar dude, Donna and Bartello, Lucille, captain of the Chocobo Knights. Every single one of these characters you can find in each area you travel within, and they have their own stories that begin and end in different places. Gata's ends as the Crusaders and the Albed mount a last-ditch attack on Sin, with Luzu left wondering why Gata had to die. Donna decides to abandon being a summoner, finding it all too much to bear and deciding to be with Bartello instead. See, this is one of the key themes of Final Fantasy X. Stories. Every story has a beginning and end. Hell, the very beginning of the game is Titus asking you to listen to his story. And 90% of the game is Titus reflecting on what's happened up until the point where they are now. Now, let me ask you, what is Final Fantasy XIII's story? Does it have any characters that you can name outside the main cast that had an impact on you? Final Fantasy X may have had long hallways, yes, but those hallways were filled with people fulfilling their stories. Lucille running along Mihen High Road on her Chocobo Knight, completing her rounds with Kalasco and Elma. Even the merchants in Final Fantasy X had character and their own story.
Awaka the 23rd, merchant extraordinaire.
Awaka the who?
Don't know me? Well, not many do. Not yet.
13 had an, interactable robot for a merchant? Yeah, lame. Oh yeah, and it also had a chocobo in a guy's afro. Seriously, that's like the one thing I remember about the game. There was nothing memorable about 13 in comparison. The environments were not nearly as varied as 10's, there were 0 interactable NPCs, and each of them stood around waiting for you to talk to them. But you couldn't even do that, because they instead opted to have NPC text just pop up in the bottom left corner of the screen, whether you wanted to talk to them or not. Remember what I mentioned earlier about the Oryx that could have just been standing around, waiting for Titus to talk to them instead of practicing Titus's Sphere Shot and being, actual characters? So anytime anybody tries to pop that bullshit 10 had it too, you refer them to this video, alright? Not to make this a comparison video or anything, but I think it's really necessary to differentiate the two to really realize where Final Fantasy went wrong as a whole after 10.
I'll protect Final Fantasy and make good games.
And finally, let me address the laughing scene. This scene is what a lot of people think of when they think about Final Fantasy X, and has become a laughingstock of a meme when it was taken completely out of context, since I'm sure the people that make fun of this scene haven't played the actual game. In this scene, Titus is down in the dumps because he knows he has to kill his father to defeat Sin, so Yuna decides to cheer him up by asking him to laugh, even when he's sad. And so he does this forced laugh. And, oh God, Titus, please stop. But boom, right there, that feeling. That's exactly the whole point of this scene. It's supposed to be awkward. It's supposed to make you cringe. That's why when Yuna joins in and they're fake laughing together, they break out into actual laughter. It's honestly such a powerful scene that most people don't give it any credit for. Yuna and Titus both laugh in the face of the monumental task that awaits them both, and it really helps sell how close Yuna and Titus become throughout the rest of the game, because this is the scene where I think they really begin to fall in love with one another. Okay, so before I touch on the beautiful ending message of this game and the end of one of the most important stories of the game, Titus's, let's talk about Blitzball. I don't care what anyone says, I think Blitzball is a lot of fun. Like, dude, yeah, it's a numbers game and a lot of it is based on stats, but with enough skill, you can change the outcome of a match even with crappy characters. I don't know why so many people like to shit on it, other than the fact that some pretty decent unlockables are behind a Blitzball wall, but guys, come on. I think it was better than Triple Triad. Yeah, that's right, I said it. Outside of Blitzball, there's a pretty sizable endgame to Final Fantasy X. You can unlock all the celestial weapons, complete the monster arena, which unlocks some seriously mean monsters. I mean, just look at this. So then you gotta min-max your stats all across the sphere grid, start doing over 9,999 damage, go fight the Dark Aeons, get shit on, level up, come back, get shit on again, say screw this frickin' guy, Yojimbo Zanmato this idiot for me, yeah! Yeah, the endgame will keep you occupied for hours and hours on end if you want it to, and I really can't think of an endgame as expansive as Final Fantasy X's, especially when you consider that it's a single-player game. It is quite a grind though, but if you're into that, you may find the endgame more fun than the actual game itself. Me personally, I'm more of a story guy, so I'll leave the 99,999 HP plus bosses to you pros out there, okay? Now, we've talked about the world building, the characters, the combat, the endgame, and the theming of stories, but what about the end of Titus's story? Not gonna lie, I can't think of a story that's hit me as hard as Final Fantasy X's since Crisis Core back on the PSP. Let's get into it. The whole game is centralized around Sin and Yuna. Yuna is a summoner who must go through trials and gain Aeons and become more powerful in order to defeat Sin. However, if Yuna fights Sin, she will die when summoning the final Aeon, and even when she summons the final Aeon, Sin will just come back in 10 years anyway. Titus seems to be the only one to question this whole thing, like, what the hell are you idiots doing? If it's just gonna come back, then why even bother? He is adamant that there has to be another way to go about doing this, and eventually everyone else comes around as well, especially when they learn that the final Aeon has to be made from one of the Guardians. So pretty much the whole game, you're thinking Yuna is gonna be the one to die for sure. But, surprise, surprise, there is another way to defeat Sin, and this way, he'll be gone forever. The only catch is, Titus will die instead, or disappear, whatever you want to call it. Now, at the beginning of the game, I could not have seen Titus sacrificing himself to save Yuna, or anybody for that matter. The game goes out of its way to show the player, hey, Titus was a bit of a crybaby bitch at one point.
What? Me? Emotional?
I heard you were quite the crybaby.
Yeah, maybe when I was a kid. Maybe even a little now. Just a little.
But throughout the game, Titus develops. He begins to realize, hey, my dad loved me, even if it was in his own messed up way.
Just a sec, dear.
Go to him. He'll cry if you don't.
And his adventures in Spira, the things he sees on his travels, the gradual acceptance that he won't ever go home. All of these things really allow him to come into his own as Yuna's guardian, and he becomes dependable. Auron sees it, and so does Jecht. But Titus isn't the only one that develops. Wakka realizes that his grudge against the Al Bhed is completely unfounded, but his joke about Riku's home blowing up friggin' just kills me every time.
Boom! Like happy festival fireworks, yeah?
You can cram your happy festival, you big meanie.
Yuna begins to realize that it's okay to want things for yourself, to find your own path in life. Lulu begins to learn how to be more compassionate and gets rid of that cold, hard exterior. Kamari, who literally does not say a word until halfway through the game, perhaps partly due to his horn being broken by his Ronso brethren, is encouraged by Titus throughout the game until he speaks once again and is able to redeem his honor in a one-on-one, well, actually one-on-two battle against Biran and Yankee. And Riku, well, there's nothing really wrong with Riku, she's best girl, come on. But in all seriousness, every single one of these characters is able to grow because of Titus. He's a complete outsider in the world of Spira, and he's able to shake Wakka's, Yuna's, Riku's, Kimari's, and Lulu's ideals because of it. And that's why the ending hits that much harder. The final battle is one that's bittersweet. On the one hand, Titus knows that he has to go through with this fight to bring the eternal calm. On the other hand, he has to kill his own father because Sin is jacked. And that's just the first tearjerker in this depressing but beautiful ending. Then, right after you kill your own father, you're thrust into a battle against the Aeons you've been summoning all game, with each of them begging you to put them out of their misery as they become possessed by Yevon. And every time you kill one, Yuna has this pained look on her face that becomes more and more prominent with each Aeon you destroy. You even gotta kill the bonus Aeons. Oh, come on, not Yojimbo. He has a dog. Oh, come on. Then literally, right before the group is about to fight Yevon, Titus does the grand reveal. Surprise! I'll disappear if we fight Yevon. Okay, let's do this. Leroy Jenkins. Like, god damn, Titus, can you give my eyes a break? I don't have enough tears, jeez. What a beautiful game, from start to finish. As I write this script, I feel a bit empty about having finished it all. I don't want my journey to end. I want to know what Wakka and the Oryx are up to. Did he end up going back to Blitzball? You know my boys better party around that trophy I got them against the Luca goers. I bled for that damn thing. Last minute goal against them on the first try. Oh, you know I had to make sure they went out with a bang. Sorry, a little off topic there. I guess that just goes to show you how much I loved the time I spent in Spira. I really got connected with these characters and this world that they live in. That's why that speech Yuna gives at the end really is a great ending message to those who have made it to the end. Titus is gone, and even though the eternal calm is here, nothing can replace that gaping hole in Yuna and the rest of the group's hearts. All they can do is never forget those happy moments they had together.
The people and the friends that we have lost. No dreams that have faded. Never forget them.
Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching this whole little video I did with Final Fantasy X. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, make sure to like and subscribe. Otherwise, I'm not going to play Final Fantasy X too, okay? Oh, wait, what the hell is this?